He sang of the glory and marvel still to be born, of Godhead throwing off at last its veil, of bodies made divine and life made bliss, immortal sweetness clasping immortal might, heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought, and the delight where every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy.
So now you could read Godhead.
Sri Aurobindo. The Godhead is all that is universe, and all that is in the universe, and all that is more than the universe. The Gita lays stress first on his supracosmic existence, for otherwise the mind would miss its highest goal and remain turned towards the cosmic only, or else attached to some partial experience of the divine in the cosmos. It lays stress next on his universal existence, in which all moves and acts. For that is the justification of the cosmic effort, and that is the vast spiritual self-awareness in which the Godhead, self-same as the time spirit, does his universal works.
See, we have to go very slowly through these words of Sri Aurobindo because we see first the Gita laying stress on God's supracosmic existence.
Yes.
And then we see that it lays stress next on his universal existence. And then we see that the Godhead is self-seen as the time spirit and doing his universal works. And then he continues even more. Next.
Next, it insists with a certain austere emphasis on the acceptance of the Godhead as the divine inhabitant in the human body. For he is the immanent in all existences, and if the indwelling divinity is not recognized, not only will the divine meaning of individual existence be missed, the urge to a supreme spiritual possibilities deprived of its greatest force, but the relations of soul with soul in humanity will be left petty, limited, and egoistic. Finally, it insists at great length on the divine manifestation in all things in the universe and affirms the derivation of all that is from the nature, power, and light of the one Godhead.
So, yes, how beautifully he carries us through. So after the supracosmic, after the universal, after the time spirit doing that, then the acceptance of the Godhead in the human body is so powerful, so beautiful. Because without that understanding in us, then there's nothing really. Uh, he says humanity will be left petty, limited, and egoistic. So at the end, he says that everything, the divine manifestation in all things in the universe, and affirms the derivation of all that is from nature, power, light of the one Godhead. Therefore, nature is the divine, but we don't always see her as the divine because very often there's perversion, and we don't see that perversion as divine. But if everything is the divine, that is also the divine. So carry on.
He says that through nature's contraries we draw nearer God.
Absolutely. And also he's going to talk to us very soon here about these asuras. So let's carry on.
The Godhead is one in his transcendence, one all-supporting self of things, one in the unity of his cosmic nature. These three are one Godhead. All derives from him, all becomes from his being, all is eternal portion or temporal expression of the eternal. Essays on the Gita. The Godhead is one in all things that are, the Self who lives in all, and the Self in whom all live and move. Therefore man has to discover his spiritual unity with all creatures, to see all in the Self and the Self in all beings, even to see all things and creatures as himself. Atma upamayena sarvatra, and accordingly think, feel, and act in all his mind, will, and living. This Godhead is the origin of all that is here or elsewhere, and by his nature he has become all these innumerable existences. Abhut sarvani bhutani. Therefore man has to see and adore the One in all things, animate and inanimate, to worship the manifestation in sun and star and flower, in man and every living creature, in the forms and forces, qualities and powers of nature. Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. Essays on the Gita.
I told you, I think, what Khalil Gibran said about the stone.
No, I didn't.
Okay. He said, the only difference in me and the stone is the speed of our heartbeats.
Mm.
And this is what Sri Aurobindo is telling us, that if we cannot see the divine in the star and the flower, in every form and force of the world, in every living creature, then we're missing something. Animate and inanimate, alive and not alive, to worship this manifestation in the sun and star and flower. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's just so extraordinary. And he's taking all of this from the Gita. It's his essays on the Gita. So
does
now,
it with a mental acceptance, or so to say, of this idea, and then it becomes a more living experience, or does it come as a living experience? And well, then that is it, the living experience.
I think it's a gradual evolving experience because everyone is not quite ready for that. But did I tell you about George Washington Carver, the great horticulturist, and one in Alabama in the university? He was one of the first black men to be a great botanist.
Mhm.
And he knew every flower, every plant, every creature. So one time his ingenious students put together an insect out of three other insects, ingeniously. You could not tell that they had done it. And they took it to him and they said, "Sir, can you tell us the name of this insect?" And he said, "Yes, it's a humbug." And for me, his greatest quote is something that I'd like you to memorize. Anything will give up its secrets if you love it enough. So Narad is speaking now of these bodies that are made divine, life made bliss, this immortal sweetness clasping immortal might. And might is very, very key here. Heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought. And then he continues, and the delight when every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy. And now this very, very important passage. And
as we sang, the demons wept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long, dreadful task, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain, and glad release from their self-chosen doom, and return into the one from whom they came.
yeah, so we have to really go deeply into this. The demons are the asuras. And these asuras have taken upon themselves a self-chosen doom. Why? To push man, to move him from his inertia, his tamas, to urge him, to poke at him, if you will, with their negatives and their darkness. And then he says they wept with joy because they foresaw the end of their long, dreadful task and the defeat, finally, that they hoped for in vain, and the glad release of their self-chosen doom so they could return back into the one from whom they came. Is that clear to you now?
Yes, it is.
Because it's very complex, isn't it? And then we have to go through the one, because Sri Aurobindo has much to say about the one. So let's do that.
Sri Aurobindo, the being is one, but this oneness is infinite and contains in itself an infinite plurality or multiplicity of itself. The one is the all. It is not only an essential existence, but an all existence. The infinite multiplicity of the one and the eternal unity of the many are the two realities or aspects of one reality on which the manifestation is founded, the life divine.
So he speaks here of the earthly manifestation, this manifestation of an evolving, progressively evolving force that is now at the human level and will go higher and higher. So we'll continue.
We see that the Absolute, the Self, the Divine, the Spirit, the Being is one. The Transcendental is one, the Cosmic is one. But we see also that beings are many, and each has a self, a spirit, a like yet different nature. And since the spirit and essence of things is one, we are obliged to admit that all these many must be that one, and it follows that the one is or has become many. But how can the limited or relative be the absolute? And how can man or beast or bird be the divine being? But in erecting this apparent contradiction, the mind makes a double error. It is thinking in the terms of the mathematical finite unit, which is soul in limitation, the one which is less than two and can become two only by division and fragmentation, or by addition and multiplication. But this is an infinite oneness. It is the essential and infinite oneness which can contain the hundred and the thousand and the million and billion and trillion. Whatever astronomic or more than astronomic figures you heap and multiply, they cannot overpass or exceed that oneness. It just blows your mind.
Yes. And now he's going to take something from the Isha Upanishad.
For in the language of the Upanishad, it moves not, yet is always far in front when you would pursue and seize it. It can be said of it that it would not be the infinite oneness if it were not capable of an infinite multiplicity. But that does not mean that the one is plural or can be limited or described as the sum of the many. On the contrary, it can be the infinite many because it exceeds all limitation or description by multiplicity and exceeds at the same time all limitation by finite conceptual oneness. Life divine.
I will read to you page 825 at the very end of Savitri, the last page of this edition, which I believe was 93. The final printing was 93. Let me just see. Well, no, the first edition was 5051. The revised edition was 93, and there was a 13th impression in 2003. What he says here is directly from the Isha Upanishad. The one unmoving is swifter than thought. The gods cannot overtake it, for it travels ever in front. It moves, and it moves not. It is far away from us, and it is very close. The gods of the overhead plains can do much to bridge that distance and to bring out that closeness, even if they cannot altogether overtake the reality that exceeds and transcends them. Oh, magnificent. So we have a little bit more to go through yet.
He who has conquered the immortal seats came down to men on earth, the man divine.
And he capitalizes man. And there's so much that he says about man that I think we have to read it. It may take us a little longer, but that's all right. Man is preeminently,
Sri Aurobindo, man is preeminently the mental being, social and political thought.
now this was written in the turn of the century, in the early 1900s. Now, let's see what he says in the synthesis of yoga and the supramental manifestation, which is the last thing he wrote.
For man is precisely that term and symbol of a higher existence descended into the material world in which it is possible for the lower to transfigure itself and put on the nature of the higher, and the higher to reveal itself in the forms of the lower. This is of yoga. For what do we mean by man? An uncreated and indestructible soul that has housed itself in a mind and body made of its own elements. Implemental manifestation. Though man is infinitely greater than the plant or the animal, he is not perfect in his own nature like the plant.
Isn't that beautiful? And,
Yes.
and it's very clear because the animal doesn't have a mind.
Yes.
The animal and the plant grow by an instinct which is spiritual. The plant is always reaching for light.
Yes.
Almost all plants. There are a few that grow in the shade and like the shade, but they still want light, if not the sun. And their ultimate offering is the flower. What could be more beautiful than that? So we are greater than the plant or the animal, but we're not perfect in our own nature, like the plant and the animal. When the animal kills, it kills to eat. It doesn't kill as savagery. You see, people unfortunately mistake things. They see the cat playing with the mouse, throwing it up in the air and whacking it and beating it, and they say, oh, what a cruel thing. But the cat is just softening the meat for its young ones. That's all it's doing. There's no mental thing to the cat. It knows what to do, and it knows that the young ones can't eat tough meat, and so it's tenderizing it. Okay, we carry on.
The imperfection is not a thing to be at all deplored, but rather a privilege and a promise, for it opens out to us an immense vista of self-development and self-exceeding. Man at his highest is a half-god who has risen up out of the animal nature and is splendidly abnormal in it. But the thing which he has started out to be, the whole God, is something so much greater than what he is that it seems to him as abnormal to himself as he is to the animal. This means a great and arduous labor of growth before him, but also a splendid crown of his race and his victory. A kingdom is offered to him beside which his present triumphs in the realms of mind or over external nature will appear only as a rough hint and a poor beginning. The human cycle.
So, Mother says that when the Superman comes, he'll be as different from man as man is from the animal.
Wow.
Okay, carry on.
Man himself is not a life and mind born of matter and eternally subject to physical nature, but a spirit that uses life and body. The Renaissance in India. The animal is satisfied with a modicum of necessity. The gods are content with their splendors. But man cannot rest permanently until he reaches some highest good. He is the greatest of living beings because he is the most discontented, because he feels most the pressure of limitations. He alone, perhaps, is capable of being seized by the divine frenzy for a remote ideal, the life divine. Man is God hiding himself from nature so that he may possess her by struggle, insistence, violence, and surprise. God is universal and transcendent man hiding himself from his own individuality in the human being. Echoes in philosophy and yoga. He, man, is a soul and not a body, and his earthly life is a means for forms future conditions of his spiritual being. The synthesis of yoga. Man is a transitional being. He is not final. He is too imperfect for that, too imperfect in capacity for knowledge, too imperfect in will and action, too imperfect in his turn towards joy and beauty, too imperfect in his will for freedom and his instinct for order. Even if he could perfect himself in his own type, his type is too low and small to satisfy the need of the universe. Larger, higher, more capable of rich, all embracing universality is needed. A greater being, a greater consciousness summing up in itself all that the world set out to be. He has, as was pointed out by a half-blind seer, to exceed himself. Man must evolve himself the divine superman. He was born for transcendence. Humanity is not enough, it is only a strong stepping stone. The need of the world is a superhuman perfection of what the world can be. the goal of consciousness is divinity. The inmost need of man is not to perfect his humanity, but to be greater than himself, to be more than man, to be divine, even to be the divine. Essays to
This has never been explained in the West because the West has no concept that man could actually become the divine. That's only in India. But it has never been also in India with all the great sages and avatars. Although um, Vivekananda did give Sri Aurobindo some indications of the supramental in jail. He came to him and he spent, I think, 2 weeks telling Sri Aurobindo of the supramental, long before anything was happening with the supramental. He was still in jail as a result of the freedom fights. Interesting. So the last one, and then we'll break for tonight.
Mother. Man is the intermediary being between what is and what is to be realized. Words of the Mother.
Quite a night. Quite a night.
Very humorous, Sri Aurobindo words.
Yes. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Namaste, Narad.